Good morning, everyone, or can I say good afternoon for everybody in the world, different time zones, definitely. So, good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's participating with us today. And thank you for joining Egypt's oil and gas exclusive interview with Mr. Mathios Rigas, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Energean. Good morning or good afternoon, Mr. Matthews, and thank you for joining us for this exclusive interview with Egypt Oil and Gas.
Good morning, good afternoon, and it's a great pleasure to be today with you and addressing followers of Egypt Oil and Gas, which is a wonderful organization that is doing an amazing job to promote oil and gas activities in the country. Thank you for the
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Matthews, for that introduction. And before we start, why don't we give a brief introduction about Mr. Matthews to all our listeners here today with us. Mr. Rigas is a founding shareholder of Energean. He is a petroleum engineer with a combination of oil and gas and investment banking experience. He has been the CEO of the group since 2007 and has led Energean to successful listings on the London Stock Exchange and the Stock Exchange, and a couple of transformation deals, namely the acquisition of the Karish and Tanan fields offshore Israel in 2016 and the acquisition of Edison Exploration and Production in 2019. Under his leadership, Energean has been able to secure $3 billion financing for its projects and become the first E&P company in the world to ever to commit to becoming a net zero emitter by 2050. Being a leader of a rapidly growing E&P group, Mr. Rigas won the Executive of the Year at the Oil and Gas Council Awards of Excellence in 2018. Prior to setting up Energean, Mr. Rigas 18 years in investment banking and private equity investments in oil and gas, project finance, and shipping, which Capital Connect Value Partners, Piraeus Bank's shipping investment banking division. As Vice President of Shipping, Energy, and Project Finance at Chase Manhattan Bank in London through his career in 1993 throughout to 1999, Mr. Rigas arranged financing in excess of $5 billion mainly in the oil and gas sector. He holds a degree in mining and metallurgical engineering from the National Technical University of Athens and a Master of Science degree in petroleum engineering from Imperial College. Lots of experience, Mr. Rigas, lots of success stories, and that is very interesting. You have a very interesting bio, and thank you for that. And can we start by asking our first question, and that goes to you: is Energean is a major E&P company in the Mediterranean. Could you elaborate on the company activities?
Well, thank you very much for this introduction, and it's interesting to hear, the bio and all the story of how we got to where we are today. Energean is a company that I started back in 2007 when we bought the only oil producing asset in Greece. Back then, it was and still is an asset that is producing oil. It's the only production of Greece, small, 2,000 barrels a day. And from then, we started a growth mode of making Energean what is today the leading independent E&P company in the Mediterranean. So from the start in 2007 to where we are today, we started with 2 million barrels of 2P reserves. And today we have ended up 2020 with 850 million barrels of 2P reserves. We started with only a couple of employees, and today we're more than 600. And if you add the Abu Qir Petroleum joint venture, we are more than 1,300. We started with production of a couple of thousand barrels a day, and we end up 2020 with more than 50,000 barrels of oil equivalent production and presence in 9 countries. With the acquisition of Edison, Energean is present in Greece, in Italy, in Egypt, of course, with Abu Qir, in Israel, with a major investment. We are investing $1.7 billion in the development of Karish and Tanin. We're also present in Croatia, Montenegro, Malta, and the UK. So a true multinational company, totally focused in the E&P sector and totally focused in the Mediterranean. I originally come from Greece, and I think one of the key benefits for me is that knowing the Mediterranean and loving the Mediterranean and understanding the culture of the people in the region has been a major reason that we were successful in building this business. Because I have to say that doing business in Greece is no different than doing business in Egypt, no different than doing business in Italy or Israel. And I'll give you a small example. In Greece, in the last 12 years, I have lived with 9 prime ministers and 13 ministers of energy. In Italy, there has been continuous changes in the scene. In Egypt, I've been present for the last 12 years. We've seen all the political changes from the previous regimes to where we are today. In Israel, even today, there was the 4th election announced in a 2-year period. So you have to understand change. You have to understand how the Mediterraneans work and live. So, a big change, a big growth mode that led to what is today, as I said, the leading independent in the E&P sector in this region.
You're absolutely right. Maybe we do have similarities in our cultures, especially in the Mediterranean countries. But it is a very dynamic region with lots of ongoing changes, definitely. So definitely, you're absolutely right on that. So why don't we focus now on your acquisition with Edison? What are the recent updates on that acquisition?
Well, the acquisition of Edison closed only a few days ago. And it is a major milestone for us because it gave us access to not only assets and production, but also to a fantastic team that was built by the Edison team and still is managing the assets based in Milan, Cairo, primarily, but also in the other countries of operation in Croatia and the UK. So the key asset or the biggest asset in the Edison portfolio was and still is the Abu Qir petroleum production, and this was one of the key reasons for this acquisition. Egypt for Energean is a core country of operation. It is a very important country for us, where we've been operating for a long period of time. We were before operators of East Magawish and West Komombo, where we drilled exploration wells without the success we wanted, but that's the nature of our business. Exploration has its risks. So for us, it was very important to build an important and significant presence in Egypt. So one of the key reasons why we bought Edison, that closed, as I said, last week, after the approvals from the various governments, was to increase our presence in Egypt. It was not an easy process. And doing any deal in 2020 has been extremely challenging. 2020 has been probably the most difficult year that I've lived in my professional career. Not only we had COVID, the restrictions, the difficulties in operating, the difficulties in moving to see countries and people, but we also had a big crash of the oil price. And we had big funds and banks pulling out of the industry, making funding for acquisitions or deals very difficult. So 2020 was a very tough year for everyone, but we managed to close successfully in very close cooperation with the Edison team. And I have to say that I want to extend a big thank you to His Excellency Tarek Al Molla, who was supported us together with EGPC and EGAS to obtain all the necessary approvals that were required in the country. Egypt has been very supportive. And I think we are, as I said before, we consider Egypt a key country of operation for us.
Great. And how do you see this acquisition of Edison that was just confirmed, as you said a couple of days ago, have on the company in the short term? What's the impact on the company in the short term and also on the long term? So, especially with what's going on these days and how the business is slow. So how do you see that impact?
Well, the impact is huge. because Energean, before the acquisition of Edison, was a company that had 2,000 barrels production in Greece and the huge project that we're running in Israel that will be delivering first gas at the end of 2021. Energean today, with the acquisition of Edison, is a company that has multiple countries of operation and different areas of production. So today with Edison, we are at 50,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day in production. Big step up from what we had. So the production of Edison's assets, primarily Abu Qir, Italy, filled the gap between what we were before and the start of production from Israel. Israel will bring our total production, or the Karish production will bring our total numbers to more than 150,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day, and we will be totally focused on gas. More than 70% of the reserves and resources that we have in the portfolio are gas. We want to focus on gas. The Edison portfolio was focused on gas, so it was a very nice fit for us. It was a portfolio that is in the Mediterranean primarily, it is in gas, and it filled the gap between our existing Greek production and the startup of Karish offshore Israel. So it was a very important deal for us. The second big change is that it added a significant strength in our technical capabilities from the people based in Milan and Cairo and the UK and the other countries of operation. So it complements very nicely our team from a technical capabilities perspective. So all in all, I think it's one of those cases where 1 + 1 = 3, because there is no overlap in any of the countries of operation. There is a lot of complementarity in terms of the people, and there are assets that are in line with our strategy to be gas focused in the Mediterranean.
Great. And considering this deal, it did create one of the largest E&P companies listed in the London Stock Exchange right now. So tell us more about the opportunities that will be unleashed due to this huge financial step.
Well, Mohammed, you're right. Energean today is the largest independent E&P company listed on the London Stock Exchange by market cap, with a market cap of about $1.6, $1.7 billion. I remind you, we started only 12 years ago from virtually nothing to be the leader in the independents on the stock exchange today in London. We listed Energean on the London Stock Exchange in March of 2018. And this was the only IPO that was done on the London Stock Exchange in the E&P sector for more than 4 or 5 years. And there hasn't been an IPO done since then. There hasn't been any other company that listed on the London Stock Exchange. In fact, a lot of the big companies, the leaders of this sector, have had significant financial difficulties and have reduced in size dramatically over the last 4 to 5 years. It is not easy to be operating in the E&P sector today. We are open to risks from the oil price fluctuation. We are open to and exposed to a sentiment that is away from oil and gas. A lot of institutions around the world are choosing to go, quote unquote, greener, and we will talk about transition and the strategy. And a lot of governments are also choosing to move away from oil and gas. So to be successful in this sector, to be able to raise the amount of money that we have raised over the last 3 years is a unique achievement, in my view. Energean has raised more than $3 billion only in the last 3 years to fund the IPO that we did, the Karish Tanin project, the other activities of the group in Greece and other places, plus the acquisition of Edison and the projects that we will talk about, no doubt, later. So the markets trust Energean. The investors trust Energean. The banks trust Energean because we always deliver on our promises. We delivered the acquisition of Edison as we had promised by year end. We are delivering the project in Israel that will start to produce first gas by next year. And that is what investors want. They want to see a company that delivers on its promises. They want to see a company that is focused, and we are focused in the Mediterranean. They want to see a company where management has a material interest in the shareholding. So we have alignment with shareholders. And we are a company where the management holds a big stake in the shares of the company. So we're totally aligned with shareholders. We don't think like the usual company, which is all about salaries, bonuses, and what is going to be the next deal to keep us busy. We think about shareholder value. So we're totally aligned with shareholders. And what I said before about the division of this industry, or what people are thinking, is very important for Egypt. Egypt has made a choice to produce oil and gas, to be self-sufficient, and to export oil and gas. Other countries, like Italy, have chosen not to explore or produce for oil and gas, but they're still using oil and gas. So the countries that choose not to invest or not to attract investment in oil and gas end up importing all their hydrocarbons. So in my view, the world is moving, or there's a big shift and a big move towards renewables. Everybody's talking about it, and we'll talk about our commitment to net zero. But still, the world needs oil and gas. Still, people need to drive their cars. Still, people need to use electricity. They need heating and petrochemicals. So there's a huge need for the products that we produce. So the smart countries, in my view, are the ones that will take advantage of this, like Egypt, that will become self-sufficient and will be also exporters of hydrocarbons. And that is the role that we want to play. We want to work with countries like Egypt, like Israel, and other countries that want to promote oil and gas investment, always in an environmentally friendly and sustainable way. And that's exactly what characterizes us. And combine production of hydrocarbons with total commitment to protection of the environment and close cooperation with local communities. So, in a nutshell, the way I see the world developing right now is companies like us working closely with governments like the Egyptian government to promote oil and gas investment in the sector that also has not only a financial impact, but also a geopolitical impact. It is extremely important for countries, in my view, not to rely on others for their energy needs. And that is something that some countries understand, and some others, in the interest of, I will use the word populism and votes, they choose to talk about only renewables and forget the fact that still oil and gas is imported by those countries. So I think, you asked me a question how we see the world today in the E&P sector and how we can continue. I see transition to a greener future and to renewables as a path that has been chosen by a lot of countries and the planet. But I also see a big need for companies like us to get us to that point. So gas is going to play a major role, in my view, over the next decade in a number of countries and a number of industries. And that is what we're focusing on. Exploration and development, mostly of gas.
And would you agree with me that the positioning of Egypt in the Mediterranean with all the available infrastructure for exporting to these countries that have a renewable strategy that would require the gas is going to play a very important factor in this coming decade?
Undoubtedly. Egypt in the Mediterranean is the country that has the longest history of oil and gas production, the more mature market, the most experienced government officials that regulate this industry, the largest presence of oil and gas operators of any country, of the ones that we operate in. So that plus the existing infrastructure, the gas network, the ports, the LNG terminals, the power stations, the petrochemical plants, the refineries, all that puts Egypt in a unique position to be the energy hub of the Mediterranean. And I can tell you one of the biggest challenges that people face in the East Mediterranean, and I will talk about Cyprus, and I will also talk about Israel for now, is how to get access to big markets. Israel today, where we operate, and we will be producing gas, and we've contracted to sell 7.5 BCM per year to the local market. 7.5 BCM in a market that consumes about 11 or 12 BCM a year. So we are going to become one of the major, or the major producer of gas to the market in Israel. Is a market that has become self-sufficient and has started to export gas. But in order to attract more investment and to justify drilling more wells, you need access to a much larger market. And those larger markets are the European market or Egypt. So pipelines that connect everyone are very important. The LNG terminals, Idku and Damietta, will play a major role in becoming export hubs of gas from the region. So we see Egypt as a key country for exporting gas into not only Europe, but the rest of the world. So yes, Egypt can play a major role of becoming the hub of the region. And you know, the recent EMGF forum that has been created based in Cairo has a very important role to play. And we were one of the initial members of this forum, being the only company, I repeat that we are the only company that is present in all the countries that form the EMGF. We're present in Israel, Greece, Italy, Egypt, and we're looking to expand, obviously, in the rest of the countries of the Mediterranean. So that is a very important organization. It has to improve in certain elements. We'll talk about that if you want later. But yes, Egypt can play a major role in this energy transition strategy and become the major hub of export of hydrocarbons.
Thank you for that, and thank you also for elaborating more on the EMGF, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, which it was coming my next question, but I think you did that for me. But yes, let's talk more about that as we go on. I have so many questions for you, Rigas, and lots of questions from lots of people. So we're going to try as much as possible to get the most of these questions to our listeners today. But I want to go back to your acquisition with Edison, and I want to ask you how does this deal affect Energean's commercial and business development in Egypt?
Well, first of all, it establishes Energean as a major gas player in the country. Abu Qir is a very important asset in the gas production of Egypt. So from a commercial standpoint, all the gas is sold to government entities and EGAS and EGPC are the companies that buy all the hydrocarbons that we produce. So for us, it is the start and the foundation to build a bigger presence in Egypt. Abu Qir is an asset that has been in production from the late 70s. It is an asset that naturally is in decline. So it needs major investment to reverse this decline. And we are absolutely ready to make these investments. In fact, the future of Abu Qir goes through a new investment program in Northeast Al Amaria, North Idku. It's a $240 million investment that we are ready to sanction. That will happen over the next 18 to 24 months and bring the production levels of Abu Qir back up or even more than what they were last couple of years. So we are ready to invest in the Abu Qir and Abu Qir satellite fields, but we're also ready to invest in more assets in Egypt. And for me, being present with Abu Qir in Egypt today as I said before, it is the foundation, the platform based on which we want to grow the presence of Energean in Egypt.
So do you have one of the questions that came in right now? What's your plans for operations for Abu Qir? Has that been set for the coming period, or is that still in the process?
No, Abu Qir is a very well-run operation from Abu Qir Petroleum. The relationship with our joint venture partner is excellent, and I think we will continue operating the same way. Obviously, we will bring in, if you want, the enthusiasm and the energy that comes from a committed E&P investor, because EDF, the owner of Edison until last week, was not interested to invest in the E&P sector. And that was naturally reflected in the lack of investment in the asset over the last 2 years. Today, Abu Qir is owned by a company that is only investing in the E&P sector, and gas in Egypt are a priority. So I think the employees of Edison, the employees of Abu Qir Petroleum will see a big positive change from a shareholder that is willing to invest, that wants to increase production and wants to become more efficient, wants to keep costs low because we need to be able to return money to our shareholders, but is totally committed to the sector. And that is a huge change. I have to say that speaking to my new colleagues from the Edison team, I sense a very positive momentum because they feel that a new era has started. So they're moving from a shareholder that did not want to invest, they did not believe in the E&P sector, into one that is totally committed to the E&P sector. And I think that is a big change in what's going to happen also in Egypt. So not only we're going to be dedicated, not only we will focus on Abu Qir, but we will continue and invest in the Northeast La Maria, North Idku project, which has taken a very long time to sanction. So, and it's ready to go now.
That's very, very encouraging messages to hear. And with a company with your ambitions and to see how really committed you are to the E&P world these days, why don't you give us some more information on your tendency for other acquisitions? Are there any plans for other acquisitions in the coming period? In Egypt, in the Mediterranean, anywhere in the world?
You cannot obviously pre-announce acquisitions, as you can. But as I said, we are going to be totally focused in the Mediterranean. So that is a key area of focus for us. I've said it many times. We will only do business in countries that I can fly to within 3 hours from Athens. Very simple rule. And that's not because I don't like flying. This is a very simple rule that we follow to stay focused. And companies like us need to understand the subsurface, the rocks, but they also need to understand and be able to operate in the above surface issues. And I think that Energean understands the above surface issues better than anyone else. And by better than anyone else, it's proven by the fact that we operate in all these countries. So this is something that we need to take advantage of. Will we buy more assets or more companies? For the time being, the priority is to integrate the Edison assets, portfolio, and people into our business, to deliver gas from Karish next year, to invest in Northeast La Maria and North Idku, to invest in other projects that we have in the portfolio. There's a big investment in Italy, Cassiopeia. There's a big investment in Greece called Epsilon. There's another big investment in Israel called Karish North. So we have a very, very active investment program in our existing portfolio before we go out and look for new acquisitions. We will look at anything. We obviously look to add value to shareholders, but we have to remember, you have to have solid foundations. You have to have your feet solid on the ground before you continue the growth. Because the growth that Energean has seen over the last decade is phenomenal, but every time it's built on solid foundation. So we will not rush to grow for the sake of growing. Being big is not what this game is all about. The sustainability of the business is what counts. So for me, it is more important to be around in the next decade. I'm sorry, I'm hearing echo. Don't know if the technical team can do something about it. So for me, it is very important to be around the next decade and continue the growth. And have another interview with you from today and see Energean around being continuously the leader and not disappear.
Well, let's plan for another interview so this same time next year and see where we stand by that time. Let me have my final question with regards to Abukir, and then we'll go to other important aspects of Energean. But according to the company's results in the first half of 2020, Energean's Abukir's exceeded 2020 guidance of, and how do you believe this company achieved this success in 2020?
Well, I have to say that the success of 2020 is not attributed to us. It's attributed to the Abukir Petroleum team and to Edison, because we were not managing the asset. We were supervising, obviously, what was going on. So I have to give credit to the Egyptian team, to Nicholas Kacharov, who's running the business in Egypt. He's a general manager for our business in Egypt, to Aldo Costantini, who's a general manager appointed from us in Abukir Petroleum, and the rest of the team, because I cannot name all of them. So Abukir is an asset that needs investment. I repeat that. It's an asset that we need to put money into, to drill infill wells, to go into new horizons. The facilities have a lot more capacity to produce. It's a very similar story with our Greek asset. You have huge facilities that are designed to take a lot more production than what we have today. And we need to fill them with more gas, more condensate, and more products that will be going through them. Without new investment, Abukir will follow the natural decline of any gas field around the world. So, yes, 2020 was a successful year, but I think everybody needs to understand that Abukir needs money, needs investment, needs proper and active management. Without that, Abukir won't exist in a few years' time. And together with that, obviously, we need to take into consideration the jobs, the social impact, plus the impact that this field has in the production. So I repeat, Abukir needs investment. It cannot continue without more money going
in. Mr. Rigas, I want to go to another question regarding your experience as a foreign investor and working with the Egyptian government. How do you see from that experience how does the Egyptian government mainly support foreign investors, especially in the oil and gas industry?
Egypt is a country that, as I said, I've been operating for over 11 years. And I have to say that it is a country that I feel very comfortable. It's my second home. I love being in Cairo. I love being in Alexandria. I love being in the deserts and the cities of Egypt. I love the people. And I think I understand very well the culture and the mentality. And I think that is reflected also in the relationship that we have with the Egyptian government. The Egyptian government, under the leadership of, in the E&P sector, under the leadership of His Excellency Tarek Al-Molla, is a government that promotes investment, that understands the need of investors, and makes us very comfortable to make the decision to invest in projects like North Idku and Northeast Ala Maria. So we've seen throughout the process of Edison a supportive government. Not all countries were the same. I can give you an example. Algeria was very different. Algeria sent a very negative message for us, and they did not allow us to go in and do the same thing that we're going to do in Egypt. So they lost the opportunity by not promoting this type of investment and the acquisition of the Edison assets in Algeria. Egypt was very different. Egypt was very supportive. Egypt welcomed Energean. we were present and are present in Egypt, but welcomed Energean as a bigger player. And that gives us confidence to continue to grow. Obviously, the country is going through difficulties, like every other country in 2020, because of COVID, that has affected financially the country. That is reflected in the situation with receivables that everyone is experiencing, and that needs to be improved. There's no doubt that that is a key message that will even further promote investment in Egypt. And the government, again, has given very positive signs, and I know that they're doing everything they can to solve the issues that we're faced with. And companies like Energean do not have the balance sheet of a Shell or an Exxon or a Chevron. And we live and breathe from selling oil and gas. So we need the cash flows to be coming regularly. The government, I repeat, has given the right signs. So it is the right environment. It is a government that understands the need for oil and gas. It promotes oil and gas. It welcomes investors that respect the rules, the regulations, play above the board, and are clean and proper in every aspect of the business. And most importantly, it helps and promotes investment in the sector as opposed to other countries that do not. So it is the absolute right environment for us, for a company like Energean, to invest more money. And that's why I said that Egypt is and will continue to be a core country of operation for us.
From an investor with the size of Energean, especially after the acquisition. So
let me add one more thing, Mohammed, because I think it's not just my words. We closed the acquisition of Edison that was funded by a number of international banks, and we closed it with a reserve-based lending facility that was primarily focused on Egypt, the Abu Qir asset. So even the financial market and the banking market gave a vote of confidence on Egypt. So the right company with the right assets can actually not only raise money, but deliver big acquisitions in the country. It has been the case for everyone. And there's been a number of attempts in Egypt for acquisitions of companies or assets that didn't materialize. So I think governments and companies have to be very careful to choose the right companies that they want to do business with, because not everyone can deliver an acquisition in 2020 of this size. There's been very few deals that have happened, cash acquisitions in 2020. Very few companies that have the technical capability and they have the financial strength to deliver these types of deals. So the countries that recognize that and the sellers that recognize that end up with deals that close, like Edison. EDF managed to achieve their objective, which was to exit the E&P sector. Egypt has ended up with a committed operator as opposed to an operator that wants to do different things because they chose us as opposed to someone else. There has been a number of deals that failed. So choice of a committed company and a committed operator is extremely important for me when deals like that happen.
I agree more. I think your last message is very important to understand the type of environment and how that does attract different players, not just E&P companies, exactly, and that plays a significant role in times where, of course, oil and gas is not the transmission of energy that where we're focusing on. The world is more focused on energy, as you said, greener energy, renewable energy. So I think an acquisition with that amount or with that capacity in these times is a success story by itself, definitely. And going into that point and talking about Energean's strategy to be a net zero emitter by 2050, can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and thank you for the question. It's a very important one for me because in December of 2019, we made a big commitment. A year ago, we were the first company in the world, as you said in your introduction, E&P company in the world, to commit to become a net zero emitter. What does net zero emitter mean? We all have scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And for those of you that are listening, scope 1 emissions are the emissions, CO2 emissions that we generate through our operations. When we burn gas or oil for our operations, we use our compressors, our power stations, etc. Scope 2 are the emissions that are generated from the use of energy that we buy from third parties. So we committed that the total scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of Energean will end up in a net zero position by 2050. And some people may say, yeah, but 2050, you're going to be, I don't know, 85 years old, you probably won't be around. So you're making a commitment for a day that you won't be around. It is absolutely not the case. These are major statements and moves that we make that take time and are followed by immediate actions. And the first action that we took was to reduce our carbon intensity by 70% in the first 3 years of our commitment. So we're moving from being pure oil producer to gas. We're moving to through the acquisition of Edison to even more gas. And with the addition of the Karish field, when we will be producing 150,000 barrels of oil equivalent, mostly in gas, our carbon intensity, meaning the kilograms of CO2 per barrel of oil produced, will fall below 8, maybe 7 kilos per barrel of oil produced. And we will continue to reduce the carbon intensity until we reach our target, which is to become a net zero emitter. That is a message that is not easy to make, because some people will say, well, you're an oil and gas, excuse me, you're an oil and gas company. How can you get there? And the answer is very simple. Number 1, by focusing on gas. Number 2, by using or buying electricity from renewable sources. In Greece, in 2020, we signed an agreement to buy all the electricity we need for our platforms in Prinos from renewable sources. That reduced our carbon footprint by 45%. We are becoming more efficient. We will be looking at Abu Qir operations and trying to improve efficiency as much as we can. And then once we've reached the limit, because there is a technical limit, the next step is to focus on carbon capture and storage projects where we actually reverse. Instead of emitting CO2, we will be re-injecting the CO2 back into the ground. And that is the role that oil and gas companies can play in the future. And oil and gas companies have a unique know-how, not only to drill wells, to manage reservoirs and put projects together, but also to manage CO2 emissions. So the role I see for us is the role of the provider of a solution to the carbon problem of the planet. So turning old assets into carbon storage areas is going to become a top priority for Energean. And this is something that we will be discussing also with the Egyptian government, because I think that that is a key topic that should be discussed. And I would invite the next Egypt's show to have that as a topic of discussion. It is becoming a major theme in Europe. There are at least 25 projects of carbon capture and storage being developed at the moment in the European Union. And I think that needs to be a trend followed also by countries like Egypt, Israel, and other places where still hydrocarbon is a key area of target, hydrocarbon production, moving into carbon storage, capture and storage, EOR projects, and reversing the emissions of CO2 from the atmosphere is going to be a top priority for us. So the net zero is a big commitment that we made and shows that Energean is going to be a leader in the sustainability side of the business. We are not afraid to talk about these issues. And I think the industry, the oil and gas industry, has been particularly bad in making the case. I see a lot of the majors If you go on their websites, you open the front page and you see pictures of nice mountains and children and nice pictures of people in green fields. We're not trying to hide the fact that we produce oil and gas. That is a fact of life. The question is, are you producing it efficiently? Are you doing everything you can to be sustainable? Are you doing everything you can to get to that target of net zero? And what is the cost of getting there? So, do I have all the answers today? Absolutely not. But we're committed to get there. And that is something that our investors in London, in the world, not just in London, recognize, because we have a sustainability report that people can download from our website that talks about all these issues, that is very open and transparent in our emissions, in our environmental footprint. And I think that is what the E&P company of the future should look like. Do not be afraid to talk about these issues. Do not be afraid to talk about the numbers of emissions, because the world still needs oil and gas. So if we measure it, we can reduce it. If we don't measure it and don't talk about it and hide behind the issues and pretend that we are green, then we will never get to the desired result. So I see Energean playing a major role in the transition strategy through gas. I'll give you a small example. Israel has decided to switch entirely its production of electricity from coal-fired to gas-fired. That alone is a huge improvement in the environmental conditions of the areas where you have electricity production. Imagine the entire electricity production of the country 10 years ago was, or the majority was, through coal-fired power generation. And from a couple of years from today, it's going to switch to gas. Greece has made a commitment that in 2023, it will shut down all the lignite-fired power generation, and it will replace it with gas-fired power generation and renewables. Now, Greece does not have, unfortunately, for the country, the production, so it will rely on imports. But gas plays a major role to get to that point. And that's what I'm trying to say here, that we all want a better future for our children. I have a 24-year-old daughter and 23-year-old son. I want them to live in a better environment than we lived in. If that means going to full renewables, I'm absolutely for it. I'm absolutely supportive of that. But until we get there, we need the gas. And we need to do it in a sustainable way. And we need to focus on storage of CO2 to make sure that even the CO2 that we emit to the atmosphere is put back into the ground. So those are the key messages from my side. Net zero means a big effort to become a sustainable E&P company of the future.
I'll tell you what, why don't we also support Energean's initiative? And I understand your plan is to talk with the Egyptian government on this aspect. And we would like maybe in a later time to discuss this initiative and create the awareness of the importance of carbon emissions in Egypt. And we can work on that angle and create that campaign throughout 2021, especially knowing that the Egyptian government does have that intention and are very keen on these aspects. The latest thing that I don't know if you heard about it or not, but I think the president asked that for the government to organize the first largest exhibition to promote the use of CNG in cars in Egypt. And I think that the reason is mainly, of course, from that aspect. And they're inviting different countries and technologies outside the world to introduce these concepts and be able to transform cars into CNG, especially with the cars producers that are in Egypt right now. So I think your message is very clear. I think Energean is very keen on that. And I think showing that to countries like Egypt will play a very, very vital role, definitely.
We would be very happy to contribute. And I think one of the benefits of having companies like Energean in Egypt is that we bring, if you want, a lot of experience of what is going on in other parts of the world, especially Europe. But as I said before, we're not ashamed to talk about oil and gas, and nobody should be, because
yes,
at the end of the day, as I said, oil and gas companies will be part of the solution to the problem of the planet. There's no doubt that the planet has a problem. What I don't want to happen as a citizen of this world, not as a citizen of Greece, Egypt, or Israel, or any other country, is I don't want us to be pushing the problem to third world countries. Because a lot of people talk about, you said CNG cars, electric cars. And cities like London, where I normally live in the winter, I prefer to be in the Mediterranean in the summer, are making a huge push on electric cars. Now, I drive an electric car myself. And people may say, well, how can you be running a gas company and drive electric cars? Well, I keep telling everyone, electricity doesn't come from the plug. Somebody,
it comes from the gas.
Exactly. So,
exactly.
Unfortunately, especially the younger generation who's more active and more vocal, believes that the solution to the planet's problem is driving electric vehicles. And yes, the situation is going to become better in the big cities if we drive electric vehicles, but somebody has produced the battery. Somebody has been digging around another country for raw material for this country, for this battery. Somebody has moved this with ships around the world that burn fossil fuels. Somebody has created paint and other plastics for the cars. And somebody needs to recycle all this back into the ground after the end of its life. So let's look at the total carbon footprint of every solution and make sure that when we take decisions, they are not done just to save London, Paris, New York, or the big cities, but they are a solution to the planet's problem. Because moving the problem to an African country where nobody cares and we just move the problem there is not the solution to the planet. So
Absolutely.
Let's be realistic. Let's all understand that gas is, as I said before, the transition fuel to the future, and make sure that, yes, CNG cars, electric cars, or any other solution that is promoted is in line with what the world and the countries need. But again, we will still be emitting CO2. This is not just the oil and gas industry. Mohammed, we're talking about the cement factories. Absolutely. We're talking about the refineries, the steel mills, the petrochemical plants. So whether we like it or not, this is not just about cars. This is about the major emitters. I'll give you an example. The cement business in Greece alone, or one of the businesses, emits more than 3.5 million tons of CO2 per year in the atmosphere. It doesn't really matter how many electric cars we bring into the city of Athens if we don't solve the problem of emitting carbon from the major industries. That's why I'm saying carbon capture and storage is very important, not just for the oil and gas industry, for other industries. Because the world, if we want to grow, we will need cement. We will need refined products. We will need petrochemicals. We will need all sorts of other raw materials. So we need to find a solution to the CO2 problem of the world. And the oil and gas companies, Energean, can become the solution or part of the solution to this issue, but it needs to happen very closely with governments. I'll give an example. In Norway today, there's a project called Northern Lights, where a number of companies will be injecting CO2 back into the ground to reduce further the environmental issues related to industries. It is 80% funded by the Norwegian government. 80%. Because the government recognized that they want the investment, but they also want a clean environment. So this is what I said, clear cooperation between government, industry, and NGOs, because we're not against the Greenpeace of the world or the other NGOs. We are all living on the same planet. As I said before, I want my kids to grow in a better place. So we need to find solutions that are sustainable, and they're not only solutions that please the voters of a special country or a special political party for the short term.
Yes.
Energy and investment is a long-term game and a long-term business. We do not invest hundreds of millions of dollars, which we need to invest for a quick return. Unfortunately, we're not like a high-tech company that can come up with a new solution and in 3 years become billionaires. Okay, this is the dream of every young kid these days, to become the next Facebook owner or Tesla or
not just kids, not just kids, Mathios. Everybody.
Well, I've learned from my experience that this is a long-term game and it takes a long time, and you need to be around in the ups and the downs of this industry. And energy and oil and gas is something that is a long-term game and a long-term investment. So governments need to work very closely with us and the NGOs to find the solution. So absolutely, your idea is an excellent one, and I would be very happy to contribute towards this front.
Excellent, excellent. And maybe after this interview, I can give you a call and you can tell me your driving experience of an electric car. How does that feel? So maybe
I'll tell you online for everyone. It's fantastic to drive. It's a big pain, another big pain in our heads to try to find places to recharge it.
Yeah.
There's one more headache we have in our life which we don't need, but it's going to get better. It needs infrastructure.
I'm sure in some decades there will be portable batteries that you'll move along to recharge your cars. I'm sure that will come at a later stage.
I don't want to predict the future. I just want us to be part of the transition, the solution to these issues.
Excellent. Going back to the, we have around, I think, another 5 to 6 minutes. So I would like to try and catch up some of these important questions that we have. And I just want to go back to the, you talked about that you are present in most of the countries that are contributing in or who are members of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. So being in most of these countries, how will Energean get benefit from this organization, especially after the signing of the charter?
Yeah, well, EMGF is a very important organization, undoubtedly. But I have to say that it has to be very careful not to become a huge bureaucracy with countless hours being wasted in long conference calls from people that have nothing to do with gas. And I'm sending a very clear message here, because I was very active in the beginning, but I'm starting to lose a little bit interest when I see companies joining that are joining just for the sake of being part of this and have no real impact on this business. So I think the organizers and the committees have to understand that this has to be a real vehicle that will promote solutions for the gas business in the East Mediterranean. And these solutions go through interconnectivity. If we don't become interconnected and we just end up talking in endless conference calls and big events, there will be no progress. What the East Mediterranean needs is very simple. It is connections between Egypt, Israel, Cyprus, Lebanon, Greece, Italy, so that gas becomes a product that can move freely around the market. What the oil industry or the pure oil business has done is to make a commodity that has a global price, that can be stuck on a ship and be moved anywhere in the world that there's a need. Gas, for the time being, in the East Mediterranean, is very domestic. So in Israel today, if we produce gas, we can only sell it to the Israeli market. In Cyprus, there are discoveries that have not been developed for over a decade because they're not connected to anyone. Despite the fact that we asked them to connect to Israel and they refused, but that's a different story. Egypt is connected to Israel, but is not connected to any other country except from the LNG terminal. So the East Med pipeline that is being discussed is an important one. So the number one priority, in my view, of the East Med Gas Forum has to be how to make the gas business of the East Mediterranean interconnected, to bring gas from Egypt, from Israel, from Cyprus, from Lebanon, from any other country into the big market of Europe. So yes, very important organization, started with a great ambition, has grown into something that is starting to lose the focus that I would like to see.
Okay. Thank you for that clear message. Like everybody else in the world, I think it's very important to also understand how did Energean adjust its workflow during the pandemic, and how did the company support its employees during these extraordinary circumstances that we all live in these days, especially there's with wave 2 also these days. So what's your plans?
Yeah, that's it's, as I said before, this has been a very challenging year. I have to say that our team did an amazing job to continue operations in all countries without losing a single day of operation because of COVID-related problems. So from an operational standpoint, production in Abu Qir, in Italy, in Greece, in Croatia, and the UK did not stop for a single day. So we did not face operational problems. We faced huge problems moving people around into the projects that we are working because of travel restrictions. But we managed to overcome those with the support and the cooperation of local governments. We are building a big new FPSO. It's an FPSO that costs $1.3 billion. It is in Singapore, in the Sembcorp Marine Yard, and the yard was closed for 3 months because of COVID restrictions. So we did suffer a delay in our project, totally outside our control. So from an operational standpoint, as I said, no impact on production, some impact on the big project that we're running in Israel. On the human resource side, it has been extremely difficult to keep together an organization that had to adapt from the normal operation of going into the office every day to moving to smart working, people working from homes, people working from their kitchens, people working from locations that sometimes are very challenging because they have children, they have families around that is not easy to be focused on business. But we managed. And what we did was to stay very close to our employees, to organize social events. Zoom has allowed us to do wonderful things. I can tell you, I've been exercising online with a lot of my colleagues from around the world. We've been even cooking online with a lot of our colleagues. So it is very difficult, especially for the young generation. And I feel really sorry for the young generation. And when I mean young, I'm talking about the 20 to 30-year-olds that are coming into companies, that are starting their careers, that want to be mentored, that want to get the experience of working close to more experienced people in the organization and have to live behind the screen. It is very difficult to live in a small place alone, with no access to your colleagues, with no access to mentoring and guidance from more senior people. And that is something that I'm mostly concerned about. So I really hope that with the vaccine that is starting to get rolled out into various countries, in the UK already we had the first vaccinations, that will be behind us very soon. I want 2020 to be forgotten, if you want, from all the challenges, but I think it built a lot of different organizational issues for us, and it gave us, it gave us the opportunity to rethink how we live and how we work. Is it necessary to travel as much? Is it necessary to spend as much time as we did on airplanes, airports, and unnecessary travel? No, it's not. Can you replace human contact with Zoom? Absolutely not. So the balance and the right answer, I think, is somewhere in between. So we need to become more efficient in the way we manage our time. We definitely need to travel less, but there is no way we can replace human contact and human relationships with Zoom or other platforms that are available online. So I think we've learned to become better in the way we manage our lives. And I think that is a key outcome and a key takeaway from what we lived through in 2020. Obviously, key priority for us was to make sure that all our working environments were safe. We installed special equipment to clean the air. We installed all the necessary measures to make sure we have a safe working environment. But the risk is not the office place. The risk has been getting to the office place. Sure. And going out. And especially when we talk about the younger generation, virus has not been contracted in offices. Virus has been contracted in the bars, the clubs, the big concentration of people that we've seen over the last months in every country. It's the same thing. It doesn't make any difference. So I think the takeaway from me from COVID is that organizations like Energean, and I'm sure it's the same for you and for governments as well, have become more aware. That will also help the environmental footprint of all of us. I have to say that one of the bad things of COVID is that what had started, which was the elimination of single-use of plastic, is gone through the door. The amount of plastic bags I see today being used, masks, plastic bags, is unbelievable. So we had got better. We went back on this. We need to fix that. So I think we're going to need to learn and become better citizens and better employers going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mathios, I have so many questions. So if you allow me that, I will share most of the questions that came from our attendees here today with your team, so we can get some replies back to them because of timing. But before I end this interview, I would like to have your personal and Energean's outlook for 2021. How do you see Energean in 2021? How do you see the oil and gas sector specifically in our region in 2021?
Well, Mohammed, although I come from Greece, and Greece had a very famous oracle that could predict the future, as you know.
Yes, of course.
I try to stay away from predicting the future.
Yeah.
What I can tell you very clearly is that Energean in 2021 is going to be totally committed to the integration of the Edison business. It's going to be totally committed to making the investments in the areas that we discussed today. It's going to be totally committed to delivering first gas from Israel and becoming a company which will produce by the beginning of 22 more than 150,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day, mostly in gas, and continuously reducing our environmental footprint and being the leader in the sustainability side of our business. That is what we will look like. What the world would look like, or what the oil price would look like, I think the interesting debate, not for this forum, because it's a very big discussion, and there are others that are more expert than me, is we have clearly seen a big reduction of investment in oil and gas projects. But we haven't seen an equivalent reduction in the demand for these products. So as the economies go back out of the 2020 misery and people start to move again, people start to travel again, industries start to work again, my concern, and maybe I would say hope, is that we will see an imbalance of the supply-demand side. And that is, and I think the world does not understand that investing in oil and gas is not something that you switch on a tap and suddenly you produce more gas. An investment in a field like Karish in Israel takes 3 years, maybe 4, and needs $2 billion of investment to start producing gas. So you can't start just like that. So we need to explore, we need to appraise, we need to develop, and all that takes time. So the big gap that I'm seeing is that majors are cutting down investment in the E&P sector, and we will see the impact of that undoubtedly in a couple of years' time. I also see that with a big shift of majors moving out of the E&P sector to a large extent and focusing a lot more renewables, there will be a lot of opportunities like the one that we took advantage of from EDF. EDF decided to get out of the E&P sector. So I think we will see more of that. We will see majors leaving assets or even countries that are not considered core. And for the E&P players like us, that will create huge opportunities. And that is what we will be focused on.
So what I understand is that from what you're saying is that we could see the 70s and the 80s dollars a barrel come back again sometimes in the coming maybe 3 to 5 years.
As I said, I don't predict.
Yes.
I do not predict oil prices. I will never do that, because if I could predict oil prices, I would be doing a different job and I would be in a different position. What I'm saying is I see that this lack of investment will undoubtedly lead to a supply gap.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Whether that will be reflected in an oil or a gas price imbalance, I think that will depend a lot on demand and other factors. So, there are others that are, as I said, a lot more experts than I am in predicting oil and gas prices. Whether they're right or wrong, time will tell. My view, and I think this is supported not by words, but by money, because at the end of the day, my view is if you have an opinion, you believe in something, you invest money in it. And we're investing today more than $1 billion in the E&P sector. So if we didn't believe that there was a future, we wouldn't be putting this money behind projects like Northeast Ella Maria, North Itku, and Karish, and Cassiopeia, and Epsilon, and the other big investments that we'll make over the next years. So, in a very pessimistic environment, you're hearing me very optimistic, because I do believe that there's a great future for a sustainable E&P company in the future. And that is what Energean is all about.
Thank you so much, Mathios, for all the information, that you shared with us about Energean, about your experience and how you see the market. I think it was a very, very interesting interview. I think it's one of the most interesting interviews that we had as Egypt Oil and Gas. And I hope all our attendees enjoyed it. And as I said, we will be sharing with you a couple of the questions that came in that we did not have time to actually ask them, so that we can get back to all the attendees. So we have a couple of these questions that did come in. So that shows also the interest of all our attendees that attended today. Thank you very much. And I personally look forward to meeting you in person and sometime soon in Cairo, or maybe in Greece after things calm down. I look forward to that. Get off this.
Inshallah. I think I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a very exciting interview, and I really enjoyed the questions. Some of them were tough, but I thank you for those, and thank you for everybody that participated. Very happy to answer any questions, and look forward to seeing you and everyone in Cairo or in the next Egypt show, hopefully in May.
Thank you. And some of the comments that we are just getting in live right now is such an informative and excellent interview. People are thanking you right now on Zoom for all the information that you shared. And I'd like to tell our attendees that this interview, of course, will be shared on all our social media and our website very soon. I'll keep you updated. It will also be published in our coming January 2021 issue as an exclusive interview with Mathios Rigas. Thank you so much again, and looking forward, Mathios, as I said, we would have to catch up. So maybe I'll pay you a visit in Greece and get the driving experience.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mathios.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.